All right, welcome back, zoology students. We're back here in Agrippa's Man Cave again, the online classroom, and we're going to continue our discussion on the mollusks. Today, we're going to talk about their body plan. Yesterday, we discussed the general features and their economic importance, and today, we are going to talk a little bit more about their body plan. So let's go ahead and reduce this, and let's go to back to the PowerPoint where we can discuss the mollusk body plan. So their bodies, and again, they're going to be very different depending on what we're talking about, whether it's a clam or an octopus. But all of their bodies have basically the same um, general features, and they are said to have a head foot portion, and they are said to have a portion that is considered the visceral mass. So the difference is the head foot portion is the more active area containing feeding, sensory, and locomotor organs. So these are going to be you're going to have the eyes there, the mouth with the radula, or in the case of the octopus, and squid, their beak that they have. Um, and again, that's going to be where you're going to see the most visible part of that organism and the most active part. The visceral mass, very similar to our body plan, the visceral mass is for us, it's our guts. It's where we have all of our internal organs in the abdominal region. And it's kind of similar to the mollusks because it will contain the organs that are responsible for digestion, circulation, reproductive organs, and the respiratory organs, which is very similar to our body plan in reference to what the visceral mass is. And then, of course, there's going to be two folds of skin, and those two folds of skin will make the protective mantle. Okay. And again, the mantle in your bivalves, your clam and oysters, that's going to be the two folds of skin that make the shell. So that's what we have. All right, let's move on. The head, foot, body plan. Most have a well-developed head, especially the cephalopods that will have a mouth and some specialized sensory organ. So again, depending on the organism. So if you've ever seen a snail or a slug, you've noticed that they've had antennae. The antennas are there that's their main sensory organ. And in your cephalopods, your squids and your octopi, it's going to be their eyes, their vision. They're very visual species. So, speaking of vision, it can be with some species, it can be very simple photoreceptors, which basically just means, hey, am I in the light or am I in the dark? And that's going to be the case for snails and slugs. Snails and slugs, the gastropods, are not really fond of being in the sunlight, has a tendency to dry them out. So they prefer to be in the shade, and they are primarily most active at night because you don't have to worry about the sun drying you out when it's at night. And then the cephalopods have a very complex eye, very similar to ours in its structure. So again, depending on the species, their vision will vary. And especially in the squid and octopi, there will be tentacles, and those tentacles will contain suction cups. And when we get to the cephalopods, we'll talk more about how specialized those organs are. And then the mouth will contain the structure known as the radula, which is unique to mollusks. That's the only group of organisms that have such a feeding structure. And again, the radula is in essence a tongue that's as rough as a cheese grater. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that here on this slide. So here's a couple diagrams that shows how the radula works. Again, it is considered a rasping organ. Rasp meaning it just will grind pieces of food off of whatever it is they're eating. That's how they're able to eat the hole in the leaves that we saw on the last lesson. And really, the only organism that doesn't have one of these would be the clams. They're filter feeders, so they do not need this type of feeding structure. The interesting part about the radula is it can have up to 250,000 teeth. So that's a quarter of a million teeth. So I don't know if the gastropod has a tooth fairy, but with that many teeth, I'm guessing she can go broke. So um, yeah, 250,000 teeth. So that's a pretty amazing number. So that's again, that is how they eat. They just lick with that very rough mouth part. They just again just rasp or grind off of the whatever it is they're eating right up into their mouth. All right, so the foot. Now, again, the foot is going to be very different for each individual mollusks. So the molluscan foot can be variously adapted for locomotion, attachment to the substratum, or for a combination of functions. So here's what we see: attachment discs in limpets. This is a limpet, and limpets stay touched or stay attached to the rocks and the reef and the substrate, and they're very tough to get off. And this is their foot, and their foot basically acts as one big suction cup, and it holds them down flat. So this one obviously has been pried up, and we're looking at it from underneath, but they will stay attached to the rocks. And you see them a lot of times. The marine limpets will be attached to the rocks in the tidal areas. So the surf splashes up against them, and they stay tight, stuck to these rocks, and the constant abuse and bashing of the waves doesn't bother them. That modified foot holds them tight to that rock, and they stay right where they want to be. Another foot adaptation here in this clam. This is its foot sticking out right here. And some of you have ever been to the beach, you've probably seen this. And what they do is they use this as how they move. So they stick this out, kind of looks like a big tongue. They stick it out, and then they will insert it in the sand and use it as an anchor. And then they pull the shell towards the foot. So what they do is they get the foot stuck in the sand, and then they use their muscles that would, in essence, pull the foot back into the shell. But since it's anchored, it ends up just pulling the shell towards the foot, and that's how they move. That's also how they will dig themselves down back into the sand if they want to bury themselves. And then, of course, the foot for the octopus is very, very different. And this is one of the things I want to focus on later on. This is one of their siphons, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But their foot obviously is going to be very different in their form of locomotion than the clam. The octopus basically propels itself with jet propulsion. It squirts water out, and that's how it swims, and it uses its foot to do that. So very different, three very different strategies in how to use the foot. So here's one of this little video I want to show real fast here. This is an example, and I'll play it a couple times. This shows how the in-current and ex-current siphon of the octopus works. So here's one in very shallow water, and we'll watch this. So you can see right there the water squirt out. So here, this is the in-current. So this is what it uses to draw the water into this big mantle here. And then it will squeeze the mantle and force the water out of this ex-current siphon. And when it squirts that water out hard enough, it propels it along. So if you've ever seen a singular person try to control a fire hose, you get the idea. The fire hose sometimes can absolutely just knock somebody for a loop. And so what happens, that water goes out this way, and it pushes. So the water comes out of the siphon here, pushes water this way, which then will cause the octopus body to go that way. And that's how they use their in current and X current siphon to swim. So I'll play this a couple times here and we can watch it. You see the water come out there. Play it one more time. Right here, water goes in, water comes out. So again, you see it opens up. This whole part opens up right here. The water goes in this area. And then when it wants to squirt the water out the X current siphon back down here, this door will close and then the water comes out the X current siphon. So let me erase that stuff and we'll watch it again. So watch it again. There, you see it opens when that opens, when this area opens right here, the water comes in, and then you can see this is closed, so water isn't going in or out of that siphon, and it just goes in here and out there. And we'll watch it again, and you can see that's where the octopus is going. One more time. All right. So that'll get us through the body plans. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the visceral mass in the mollusk body plan. And the biggest portion of this is going to be around and enveloped in the mantle and the mantle cavity. The mantle is a sheath of skin extending from the visceral hump that hangs down each side of the body. So in clams, this is going to line the inside of the shell, but in your soft-bodied, such as your cephalopods, your squid and octopus, that kind of thing, the mantle really forms the body wall itself because they have no shell. So your mantle and mantle cavity, again, will be very different depending on which group of mollusks we're talking about. So it protects the soft parts and creates a visceral mass inside this mantle cavity. So it creates this open area, this cavity, and then all of the organs that are involved in digestion, circulation, respiration, reproduction, that kind of stuff are all going to be found in that mantle cavity. The outer surface of the mantle secretes the shell. So in, again, your gastropods and your bivalves, this is where the shell is going to come from. And the mantle cavity plays a big role in the life of a mollusk. It is a very important component to their body plan. Usually is going to house the respiratory organs. So depending on, again, which group we're talking about, it's going to be a very different structure indeed. So here we'll look at this diagram, which is shows the mantle cavity of the bivalve. And let me just switch this to laser pointer. And what this does is, so this is one shell here, all right, one half of the two shells. So here is the mantle on this side of the animal, and then the mantle on the other side would be over top, totally enveloping all of these organs. And we can see in this clam here, these are the gills. This is what it uses to breathe. Here's the muscular foot that it will stick out of the shell to help it move. And so this mantle and then the other mantle that would be lying on top would kind of sandwich in all of these organs. And this open space between this mantle and this mantle that would be lying on top would be the mantle cavity. And then all of these organs in here would make the visceral mass. All right. So this is the end of lesson 2. So you'll have just the same as lesson 1. You'll have a set of questions there in Schoology, and whether it'll be an assignment on Schoology or if it will take you to Ed Puzzle, I haven't decided how I'll write those questions, but one of the two will be there. So just go right ahead after this, after you've watched this, and head right over there and answer those questions. We'll see you tomorrow.